So we're going to talk about unemployment, and there's a reason that we follow unemployment, obviously, because it directly impacts really the economy and definitely real estate. And the thing about unemployment right now are the claims are staying consistent. We've had last week we had about 884,000 claims, and that has pretty much remained consistent. And we're seeing a slower pace of actual job creation. Job openings are actually down year over year 20%. And I'm using July figures, or late August figures, early August figures, but they're actually down 20% year over year. And you can look at it two ways. One, have companies gotten more efficient? And I think that's part of the reason. And the second is, do they need the actual staff, right? Because maybe demand has decreased. That's part of the reason as well. The reality of the situation is that how does America look? How does the real estate market bode with high unemployment? And typically the answer to that is not well. People need to be employed to be able to pay their mortgages, to be able to qualify for a mortgage, be able to pay their rents, etc. Employment drives demand. Employment drives spending. Velocity, money velocity is really what dictates one of the huge components of indicators that show whether the economy is doing well or not. What I mean by velocity is the pace in which money circulates. If people aren't hoarding money, it's the velocity is there. They're spending. I buy a coat. The person that buys a coat buys more material. The person that buys more material hires more people to create more material. And you see how the person that got hired then needs to buy food. So that velocity is a healthy indicator of the economy. And typically what happens in recessionary times is that the velocity of money actually slows down and less people are able to touch it and less people are actually affected by it. Because as long as it's moving, then everybody that touches it gets to get the goods and services that they actually need. In a high unemployment environment, velocity slows, spending slows, people are more worried about their job. The psyche of the spender tends to go away because they see their friends and family getting let go potentially. It's a very important indicator and a predictor of how markets will do. So with unemployment remaining steady, now with that being said, we hit a peak in April. We were at basically 15% unemployment, and I want to say it was actually higher. A few things that they don't necessarily count. For one, not all furloughed employees were quote unquote considered unemployed. Some of them were considered classified as let's just say vacation. Which wouldn't necessarily affect the employment rate. And then you have people that just got fed up and they just stopped looking. So those people would necessarily affect the unemployment rate as well. So in real terms, the employment rate is probably closer to 21% during that peak. And, we can probably say that it's probably higher than what they're saying it is currently. Either way, unemployment affects spending. Lack of spending affects the economy, and it definitely is going to affect real estate. Now, as money gets pumped into real estate, the one thing I pay attention to is who's buying properties, and the surge of investors buying properties has increased a great deal as opposed to the home buyer. So we've seen the home buyer surge recently from the pent-up demand that started in March all the way through basically June, July, and people started, jumping back into the market as things started to open up a little bit. But the surge of investors buying properties is really the scary thing because they're speculative. So if they're overpaying or they're paying top dollar, they're going to have to sell for top dollar in order to obviously see a return. And we don't necessarily know how that'll pan out. If you obviously know, prices have been artificially inflated, okay, due to interest rates being so low. They've been with lack of inventory, so to speak, even though there's shadow inventory, but that is not on the market for sale, so we can only view inventory as what's for sale, and those are the things that are going to dictate pricing because those are the sales and the transactions that actually get recorded. So those investors that are chasing yield, all boats rise when the tide rises. It's just when the tide falls, all boats are still able to float. And when this tide eventually starts floating, we're going to see how a lot of these investors pan out. Many of them already have moratoriums on eviction. Many of them have, and this is moratoriums on foreclosures in some cases, which the irony of that is that will actually lighten up quicker than the moratoriums on rent. So there is a lot of distress in the market, and with high unemployment, I think that distress continues. And unless the government continues to give everybody money and pay everybody's rent, there's going to be fallout eventually. So we're in a very interesting time to see, kind of where things pan out. Going into September, like I said, I predicted that unemployment would remain high due to the lack of stimulus that the government's going to give, and in addition to that, the position that a lot of these companies are in. So the government has to stop printing money eventually, and what the Amtrak situation shows, what other company situation shows, is that once the music stops and the government stops giving stimulus, that we're going to see and feel the effects of the economy at that particular point. And again, there will be a decent amount of distress or opportunity, depending on what side of the fence you are, or if you see the glass half empty or half full. So, hoping you guys come with us to take advantage of that. Till then, I'll see you guys next video.